Hey guys, it's Jane. I'm here today to do my June wrap-up. I've spoken about most of these books, although not all of them, in Friday Reads videos as we went through the month. So I'm going to see if I can jump through them relatively quickly. There were 3 collected comics trades that I read this month. There's got to be a better nomenclature for this. I don't think graphic novel really fits, but I don't know what does. Anyway, I read Saga Volumes 2 and 3, and I read Adventure Time, Marceline and the Scream Queens. And that's 2 quite different sorts of comics, but I've been enjoying both of them. I think both of them actually have a bit more substance than many other comics that I read, and that's one of the things I've been enjoying about them. Marceline and the Scream Queens is very kid-friendly, but that doesn't mean it's unsubstantial. Saga has got sex and violence on the page, and so it won't be for everybody, but it kind of earns it in a way, I feel, because it actually deals with some real grown-up issues rather than just having sex and violence. So I'm really enjoying Saga, and I always enjoy Adventure Time because it's fun. I read volumes 3 and 4 of the Ilona Andrews Kate Daniels series this month. That is Magic Strikes and Magic Bleeds. I've been really enjoying these Kate Daniels books. Book 4, Magic Bleeds, I haven't actually talked about in a wrap-up because I read it since my last Friday Reads video. And the big thing that I need to say in case anybody cares about this one is there is a big sex scene in Magic Bleeds. It didn't completely spoil it for me. It was probably a little bit much, but because it was between characters that I'd actually known for several books and their relationship had been building, when they finally kind of get it together, in a way it kind of feels justified, although I could have done with a little bit less on the page. The story itself in Magic Bleeds was also another really solid installment of the series, and yeah, I'm continuing to enjoy them. I read Crazy Rich Asians this month by Kevin Kwan. And this is about Singapore and the mega uber super crazy rich people there and how they look down on everybody else, basically. And some of these crazy super uber rich people are Christians who meet together in a Bible study, so that was a bit hilarious. And yeah, it's a romp, a real romp of a read. And I actually thought about it quite often after I finished reading the book, maybe more often than I do for lots of other books. So maybe there is a bit more substance in it than I initially thought. But yeah, I really enjoyed that one. So if you're looking for a sort of an airport read that is enjoyable, I would recommend Crazy Rich Asians as something that would be worth your time. I read the second one in the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch, Red Seas Under Red Skies, and I found that one a little bit disappointing. I talked about why in my Friday Reads video, so if you want to find that out, you can look there. Of course, I read Dune in June. I joined in Paul's read-along, Paul from A Common Touch of Fantasy. Finally, I didn't super love the book, which I know is sort of heresy because it's a sci-fi classic, but I didn't. But the experience of reading it with people and thrashing it out, questions and ideas about it, was just amazing. I really, really enjoyed the read-along, so I'm so glad that I took part. For Japanese June this month, I read 2 things right at the very end of the month. On the almost second last day of June, I went to the library and they just happened to have on the shelf Haruki Murakami's The Strange Library, which I've seen a number of people on BookTube talk about, so I thought I'd just pick that up. It's it's basically a short story, and every other page has got pictures, so it's incredibly packaged and the pictures kind of bounce off the text and stuff. And I thought it would be a quick read, and it was. I read it in one sitting. I have to say, I'm not convinced that the production values were justified by the story. The story is just strange. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's almost like a campfire story where somebody starts it and then somebody else takes over and there's a twist, and then somebody else takes over and there's a twist. But then I kind of feel a bit like that about Haruki Murakami generally. I'm not haven't drunk the Kool-Aid, I'm afraid. I think I appreciate what other people get in him, but so far, what of his I've read has not really sung to me. So that's what that is. The other thing that I read for Japanese Dune was completely different. It was Black Rain by Masuji Ibuse, and this is really something else. It is an account of the effects of the bombing of Hiroshima during the Second World War, and it's told in a very, very on-the-ground way. It's sort of a stitching together of first-hand accounts. It is a work of fiction, but Ibuse was basing his story off first-hand accounts, and that's very much how it reads. It's a very sobering read, but it's not technically difficult, and it's told in really quite spare, unsentimental prose. And for me, that's actually what made it as affecting. It basically follows a single family, a man, his wife, and their adult niece who was living with them, and they were working on the outskirts of Hiroshima at the time when the bomb dropped. And it tells what happened that day, what happened in the days, like the week or so following, while they were trying to get to help. And then it picks up the story a year or so later when the dust has settled a little bit and quite different types of social difficulties come to the fore. When the war is over and people are trying to forget, but there are people who are still living with the consequences of the bomb in their bodies. I actually think this is a book that should be more widely read, and especially in an era such as ours, which is awash with post-apocalyptic stories. I think this is one that's a bit special because it's almost true, and it is a real corrective to some of the excesses of post-apocalyptic fantasy that we read about day in, day out. Yeah, I actually, of all of the books I read this month, that's one of the ones that I would really strongly recommend that people make time to read. However, it's difficult to say it was a favourite because it was hard going just because of the subject matter, not at all because of how it was written. But that brings us to 3 last books that I read this month, my 3 favourite reads for the month. And they were The Lost Steersman by Rosemary Kirstein. She continues to crush this Steerswoman series, and I'm just going to say one more time that if you're at all interested in science fiction or fantasy, this is a fantastic series that with terrible cover up, which is I'm sure most of the reason why it's not as widely known as it is, but it's a corker of a series and more people should read it. I also read a novella by P.T. Hylton, Thorns and Tangles, which was a really fun read. And I don't expect to go into a story about an assassin and, come off feeling warmly about said assassin, but in this one I kind of did. It was nicely written, and I'm going to be continuing with the Zane Holloway stories because I really enjoyed that one. And finally, of course, Neal Stephenson's Seveneves, which I haven't filmed a standalone review for, but I am still planning on doing. And that was my, 5-star read of the month. It was probably always going to be, but it was, so that's all good. Apart from my books that I read, I made a few other videos this month. I made one tag, the book colours tag, which was really fun, and I have managed to actually reshelve all those books now, so that's all good. I also did a video about my most tattered books. This was in response to a video I saw that P.T. Hylton did about some of his tattered books, and I, as a connoisseur of the tattered book, I decided to do one of my own. There's all my June and June videos. I did one top 5 Wednesday about my top 5 characters I would like to drown, and that was very enjoyable too. And then I had 3 Mystery Monday videos. So a review of The Winter Queen by Boris Akunin, a review of Ordinary Grace by William Kent Krueger, and a third one which was a wrap-up of the winners of the Edgar Awards this year. So that's what I did in June. What did you do in June? What was the highlight of your June? I've been sick on and off, and I've had people in my house sick. I didn't do a Friday reads yesterday because running children to doctors and such. But yeah, we're in July now. You know, we're heading out the other end of winter, and I'm very excited about that. And I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.